On a stormy night, exhausted and carrying heavy bags, Grace Carter made a mistake that would change her life forever. She opened the door of a sleek black car, searching for her ride home, but it wasn't hers. Inside sat Victor Knight, a billionaire with ice in his eyes. And instead of mercy, he gave her cruel words that cut deeper than the rain outside. What happens when two worlds, one of wealth and one of survival, are forced to collide? Can humiliation be turned into strength? And what secret ties their lives together more than fate itself? Before I reveal the full story, take a moment to follow the channel so you don't miss a single twist in this journey of courage, love, and redemption. The rain had no mercy that evening. It fell in heavy curtains, drumming against the cracked sidewalks and echoing on the worn metal roof of the small grocery store where Grace Carter had just finished paying for her groceries. Her arms trembled as she adjusted the bags. Too many for one trip, too heavy for someone who had already worked 10 hours straight. Threadbare sneakers squelched in the puddles, toes damp and cold. She pulled the hood of her faded gray jacket tighter around her face, protecting herself not just from the storm, but from the unkind glances of strangers rushing past. One step at a time, Grace. Just one more step, she whispered into the night. Grace Carter was 28, a waitress by day, a cleaner by night. Her world revolved around one reason only: Mia, her 8-year-old daughter, who was at home coloring in their cramped apartment. Grace had promised she'd bring home her favorite cereal tonight. Even if her arms felt ready to give out, she wouldn't break that promise. The glow of headlights lit the street, and Grace exhaled with relief. In the blur of the storm, a sleek black car had pulled up right ahead of her. She dug into her pocket for her phone, confirming the app. Yes, the driver she ordered had arrived. Dragging her bags faster than her body wanted to, she hurried to the car, water dripping from her hair, and opened the back door without thinking twice. Warmth wrapped around her instantly, the faint scent of leather, the soft hum of the engine. Relief was instant. For just 1 second, she felt like she could breathe again. Then she noticed the silence. The wrong kind of silence. Sitting in the back seat already was a man, one leg crossed over the other, his expression carved from stone. He wore a tailored suit that seemed to dismiss her very existence. His sharp eyes lifted from the glowing screen of his phone and locked onto her. "What?" he asked, voice dripping with disdain. "Do you think you're doing in my car?" Grace froze. Her throat bobbed, words stuck in hesitation. "I'm sorry. I thought." He raised a hand, silencing her. "You thought this was your ride? Do you look like someone who belongs in here?" His voice was calm, but the cruelty in it was a blade, slicing clean through her chest. Her cheeks burned. "Look, it was just a mistake. It's raining, huh? Of course it's raining. And of course someone like you would think an expensive car on the corner must be yours." Hoping what? His smirk looked more like a wound. That some rich fool would drive you home like a modern-day Cinderella? The words hit harder than the storm outside. Grace clutched her bags against her chest. What had been a moment of fragile comfort turned into humiliation, sharp and unbearable. "I didn't mean, get up." The command left no room for argument. Her chest tightened. For a heartbeat, Grace wanted to shout back, to tell him she had every right to exist on this street as much as he did. But the weight of exhaustion was heavier than pride tonight. So she nodded, her voice no louder than the rain. "I'm sorry." She pushed open the door and stepped into the downpour. In seconds she was soaked, hair plastered to her face, her jacket clinging like a second skin. As she hurried away, bags cutting into her palms, she could feel his cold stare burning into her back. Victor Knight let out a faint sigh as he watched through the tinted glass. He gripped his phone again, irritated, as if the brief intrusion had dirtied his evening. His assistant's voice echoed in his earpiece. "Sir, shall I move your dinner meeting to tomorrow?" "No." Tonight, Victor said curtly, brushing away the lingering image of the drenched woman who had dared sit in his car. Her eyes, blazing with both shame and defiance, haunted him longer than he wanted to admit. Grace hurried across 3 blocks until her body gave out. She leaned against a lamppost, bags sagging, the rain and her tears indistinguishable on her cheeks. Her whisper cracked. Why is dignity so expensive? It wasn't the first time life treated her like she was invisible, but tonight, the cruelty had been sharper, coming from someone who had everything. A line ran through her mind, unbidden. People like him will always look down on people like me. She straightened her back despite the sting in her chest, wiped her face, and whispered the vow she repeated every night, her mantra, her shield. I won't break. For Mia's sake, I will never break. A cab finally slowed down, splashing water on her legs as it pulled over. Grace didn't care. She slid inside, bags piled on her lap, and gave the driver her address with a tired but grateful smile. Back inside the black luxury car, Victor Knight scrolled through notes on his tablet, planning another ruthless business merger. Yet, for a flicker of a second, his reflection on the dark window showed something else. Not the cold billionaire, but a boy once forced to walk in the rain, shoes torn, eyes downcast. A boy who swore wealth would protect him from ever feeling small again. Victor blinked, and the memory vanished. He straightened his tie, burying it deeper than before. Somewhere between the storm and the silence, their life had already crossed, and neither of them knew that the wrong car was the start of everything. Grace walked up the old stairs of her building, damp from rain, keys shaking in her hand. The door creaked open, and a small voice greeted her. Mommy! Mia jumped into her arms, warm and bright-eyed, smelling faintly of crayons and shampoo. Grace dropped the bags with relief, pulling her daughter close as if the embrace could shield her from the cruelty of the world. Did you get the cereal? Mia asked, eager, hopeful. Grace laughed, choked by emotion, and showed the soggy box sticking out of the bag. Of course I did. I always keep my promises. She glanced out at the rain one last time, whispering a promise to herself. One day, my daughter will never know what it feels like to be thrown out into the storm. The week crawled by for Grace Carter. Between the coffee shop shifts and the endless cleaning jobs, sleep felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. But tonight was different. It was a gala. Not for her, of course. Grace had no gown, no jewelry, no fairy tale ticket. She was hired as help. The pay for one evening would cover part of next month's rent, so she accepted. What choice did she have? The hotel ballroom shimmered under crystal chandeliers, a palace built on glass and gold. Strings of laughter and music mingled in the air, along with that faint scent of wealth that Grace could recognize instantly. Not perfume, not champagne. No, it was the scent of ease, the electricity of people who had never worried if tomorrow would bring enough. Dressed in the black and white uniform the agency gave her, Grace walked carefully through the sea of diamonds and Armani suits, holding a tray of champagne flutes that trembled slightly in her hands. Breathe, Grace. Keep your head high. They don't know you. They don't matter. But she could feel it anyway, the invisible wall between her and them. She was the shadow making sure their glasses never ran dry. She turned into the west wing of the hall to deliver fresh drinks, and then it happened. Her gaze snapped forward, and her chest clenched. Seated at the heart of the room, speaking with investors and senators, was the same man she had tried to forget. Victor Knight, the very man who had shoved her dignity into the mud just a week ago. The face carved with arrogance, the $1,000 suit, the aura that demanded attention without effort. He was laughing, but when his gaze drifted across the room, his eyes locked onto hers. Recognition flickered. Then amusement. Victor tilted his glass, almost in a toast, but the smirk playing on his lips wasn't friendly. No, it was the same blade that cut her before. Grace's stomach sank. She wanted to turn, to disappear into the kitchen. Instead, she pressed forward, jaw clenched, delivering drinks to the small cluster around him. Well, well, Victor murmured loud enough for those at his table to hear when she set down the flutes. What are the odds? A week ago, this woman mistook my car for her personal chauffeur service. Tonight, she's serving me champagne. Laughter erupted around the table, shallow and effortless, like people too rich to question if it was kind. Grace kept her hand steady. Inside, her heart screamed. She bit her lip, forcing words past the lump in her throat. Enjoy your evening, sir. And she walked away, eyes forward, spine unbroken. Behind her, Victor raised his glass again, though for a moment his smile faltered. Her dignity, so calm, so deliberate, wasn't what he expected. But Grace's steps were heavier than she allowed anyone to see. Every laugh, every glance that followed her felt like another stone in her chest. Back in the corner near the buffet, Grace almost choked back tears, but then she remembered. She had someone waiting. Mia? 6 floors above, in a quiet guest room the event coordinator had given her, Grace's daughter sat drawing in her notebook. Grace hadn't found a babysitter and nearly lost the job because of it, until a stranger stepped in. The stranger appeared minutes before the gala began, an elegant woman with silver hair cut into a graceful bob, draped in pearls and silk. She introduced herself with a soft voice and reassuring smile. My dear, you look worried. Problem. Grace hesitated but admitted the truth. She had nowhere for Mia to stay. Instead of judgment, the woman smiled warmly. Bring her upstairs. Children shouldn't be left alone in nights like these. Let me keep an eye on her. And just like that, Mia had been swept away by the woman's kindness. Now, during Grace's short break, she slipped upstairs, curious. The sight stunned her. Mia was sitting cross-legged on the carpet, happily showing her drawings to the silver-haired lady seated beside her. The woman listened with genuine interest, nodding, laughing, even imitating Mia's animal doodles with joyful exaggeration. Grace's chest tightened. She hadn't seen anyone, stranger or friend, offer that level of affection to Mia since her husband's death. Mommy! Mia ran up the second she noticed Grace and showed her the latest drawing, a clumsy but adorable sketch of a princess holding hands with a tall man in a suit. Grace chuckled nervously. You've made a new friend, huh? The elegant woman stood, smoothing her dress. Her eyes were warm as sunlight. Your daughter is precious. She speaks with such imagination. Tell me, what's her name again? Mia, Grace answered softly. The woman's expression softened further, as though the name carried some hidden weight. A beautiful name. A beautiful child. Grace blinked. Gratitude swelled inside her chest, but also confusion. What made this wealthy, refined woman so drawn to her daughter so quickly? The woman touched Mia's hair tenderly before turning back to Grace. Go finish your shift. Don't worry. She's safe here with me. Children deserve to be watched with care. Grace nodded, blinking away a sheen of tears. Thank you. Truly. 2 floors down, Victor Knight had noticed. From his vantage point near the balcony, he saw his mother speaking with a small girl in the guest suite, tall glass doors half open. He frowned. Jane Knight, the matriarch. Beloved by society, feared in boardrooms. She was warm with strangers at times. Yes, but there was something unsettled in Victor when he watched her laugh so freely with the little girl. That woman. That mother who had wandered into his car, then into his gala, now here, under his mother's strange protection. It irritated him. Why was Jane Knight, his own mother, shielding her like she belonged? Victor's jaw tightened as he raised his champagne flute. For years he had kept his world orderly, controlled, untouchable. And yet this woman, Grace Carter, had slipped through 3 times now. Through his car, through his gala, through his mother. And for the first time in years, Victor Knight felt something rattling in the steel walls he'd built. It wasn't anger alone. It was something more dangerous. Grace returned to the ballroom and resumed her shift, shoulders squared though her heart was raw. She floated between tables, aware of Victor's eyes occasionally trailing her, sharp as knives. But she clung to her mantra again. They can laugh at me, but they can't break me. She didn't know that tonight marked the beginning of something much larger than a cruel joke or a temporary job. 2 worlds had collided, and nothing would ever be the same. The days that followed the gala felt strangely heavy for Grace. Not only had she endured Victor Knight's cruel jokes in front of dozens of wealthy strangers, she also had to reconcile the unexpected warmth of Jane Knight, the elegant woman who had cared for Mia like an old friend. Who was this woman, really? Grace didn't expect to see her again. But fate doesn't ask for permission. It was the following Tuesday when Grace entered her evening cleaning shift at the upper floors of Knight Technologies, the empire of steel and glass stretching across downtown. Normally, she avoided eye contact with the suits who worked there. Tonight was no different, until she heard a familiar voice near the executive hallway. Grace. She turned, rag in hand, startled. There she was again, Jane Knight, draped in a deep blue coat, pearls glowing against her skin. She looked out of place in the cold, corporate setting, yet somehow commanding it effortlessly. Grace blinked, flustered. "Oh, good evening, Mrs. Knight," Jane finished, smiling gently. "Though, please call me Jane. Titles are for boardrooms, not for life." Grace's mouth went dry. Knight. Her pulse quickened, realization striking all at once. Jane Knight, one of the most powerful shareholders in Knight Technologies. Which meant Victor's mother. The ground felt unsteady. She began softly but couldn't finish. Jane's smile dimmed just slightly. "Yes, Victor is my son." Grace froze, images flashing through her mind, the car incident, the humiliation at the gala, the smirk that made her want to vanish. And yet, his mother had been the one saving her, caring for Mia. Why did the universe enjoy these cruel twists? Jane lowered her voice kindly, as though sensing the turmoil inside Grace. "I must tell you, your daughter left quite an impression on me. She is bright, kind. Her drawings stayed in my mind far longer than the empty conversations of that evening." Grace swallowed hard. "Mia, she means everything to me." "I can see that," Jane whispered, eyes distant, almost wistful. "And sometimes children remind us of what truly matters. Their eyes, they don't lie." Grace tilted her head, sensing something beneath Jane's words, something unsaid, hidden in the spaces between syllables. There was more behind that gentle gaze than generosity. It was almost as if Jane carried a wound, covered in diamonds, hidden in silk, but a wound nonetheless. Meanwhile, Victor Knight was in his office, watching the interaction through the glass walls of the top floor. His jaw tightened. He recognized Grace instantly. Why her again? Why was Jane lowering herself to talk to this woman, this waitress, this cleaner, this embodiment of everything Victor had sworn to escape from his childhood? He slammed the drawer shut, memories creeping into him uninvited. A younger Victor, sitting in a small, damp apartment, listening to his father argue about bills and failures. He remembered the shame of being the poor knight before his family's empire fully rose. The hunger. The pitying stares from classmates who came from wealth. He had sworn never again, never to look back. And now this woman, Grace, carried that same shadow of poverty. And worse, his mother was protecting her. Victor couldn't tolerate the unease building in his chest. He stormed down the hallway. "Mother, Victor said curtly, approaching, voice sharp enough to cut. Why are you wasting time here in the service corridors? Jane smiled at him calmly, unshaken. Because sometimes, Victor, there are people here far more interesting than the ones sitting in polished boardrooms. Victor's eyes flicked to Grace, cold and piercing. You again. Grace stiffened but forced her voice steady. I'm just doing my job. Of course you are, Victor replied with that slow, poisonous smirk. You've gotten quite good at finding your way into the Knight family's orbit, haven't you? Grace's gut twisted. He made it sound as if she was scheming, as if her existence near him was a calculated move instead of a cruel coincidence. Jane's tone cut the tension. Victor. Enough. The authority in her voice startled even him. She glanced at Grace and offered an apologetic nod, then turned to leave, her pearls swaying. Victor followed her, irritation simmering. But as they walked away, Jane whispered something so quiet only Victor caught it. You think you despise her because she reminds you of your father's struggles. But maybe, Victor, maybe she reminds you of the strength you've buried for too long. Victor's face hardened, anger masking the small crack opening in his chest. He didn't respond. He couldn't. Later that evening, Grace tucked Mia into bed, still thinking about Jane. Her daughter's sleepy voice stirred her out of her spiral. Mommy, the nice lady with the pearls, she looked at me like she knew me. Grace brushed Mia's hair gently. She was just being kind, sweetheart. But deep inside, questions spun. Why did Jane's eyes shine with such emotion every time she saw Mia? Why did she linger longer than politeness required? There was a story there, waiting in the shadows. In her mansion that same night, Jane Knight sat alone in front of the fireplace, fingers brushing against an old photograph hidden inside a leather-bound box. The picture was worn, edges frayed, a much younger Jane, smiling beside a man few people in society had ever known. The man who had been her shame, her secret. And in the center of the photograph, a child. Tears pricked her eyes. She whispered to the flames. It's time. They'll learn the truth sooner or later. For Grace, it was just another night of exhaustion. For Victor, another night burying wounds beneath steel and profit. For Jane, however, it was the stirring of a secret that had lived in silence for decades. And that secret linked them all. Life has a cruel way of throwing storms into the laps of those who are already drowning. For Grace Carter, every day felt like a battle for survival, rushing between jobs, chasing bills, protecting Mia from realities too heavy for an 8-year-old to understand. But sometimes, even the cruelest storms brought with them a twist of fate. The glamorous world of the Knights was preparing for one of its most ambitious moves yet, an international partnership worth billions. For Victor Knight, image was everything. His empire thrived on perception, control, power, perfection. And lately, his board of directors had been whispering concerns about his public image, icy, distant, unapproachable. Investors didn't just want ruthless brilliance. They wanted charm, warmth, relatability. Qualities Victor had buried a long time ago. Jane Knight had been watching her son with a mother's quiet wisdom. She recognized the walls he had built, the armor too heavy for even him to carry forever. And she noticed something else too, the way his eyes, no matter how harsh, kept landing on Grace whenever she was near. It gave Jane an idea. Grace was folding napkins at the catering agency when the offer came. One of the supervisors pulled her aside, lips curved in a strange mixture of envy and disbelief. The Knights requested you personally, the woman explained. Not as staff for food service, but as an event assistant. Helping with logistics, appearances, public spaces. A temporary contract, higher pay. Grace almost laughed. That has to be a mistake. No mistake, the supervisor pressed. Jane Knight herself made the call. Grace's mouth went dry. She didn't want more entanglement with this family, not after the humiliation and disdain. But she thought of rent, of groceries, of Mia's school shoes worn thin at the toes. Refusal wasn't an option. 2 days later, Grace stepped into a gleaming venue dressed not in a uniform, but in a simple navy dress provided by the family's wardrobe team. She felt like an imposter standing among polished mirrors and sculpted lilies, heart racing with every step. Victor noticed her immediately. His jaw tightened. "What is she doing here?" he demanded in the prep room. Jane's reply was calm, unshaken. "She's here to help." And frankly, Victor, a little humility wouldn't kill you. Victor's glare could have burned steel, but in front of his mother and the event coordinators, he said nothing. Throughout the evening, Victor observed. He watched Grace handle last-minute chaos with quiet strength. A tablecloth stained minutes before the guest arrived. She knelt and scrubbed it until it gleamed. A waiter dropped a tray of glasses, panic rising. She stepped in without hesitation, cleaning, soothing, and creating calm where there had been chaos. She didn't flinch in the face of whispers, nor did she let the haughty stares of the wealthy disturb her resolve. Grace Carter had a kind of dignity that no diamond necklace could buy. It irritated Victor almost as much as it intrigued him. At the third event of the week, something shifted. While guests mingled with champagne and false smiles, Mia tugged at Grace's hand. She had come along this time. Jane had insisted on letting her see a little beauty, as she put it. Mia, unafraid of polished marble or golden chandeliers, skipped happily around the room, eyes wide with wonder. She stopped in front of Victor, who was speaking with a high-profile investor, and tilted her head. "You always look so serious," the child announced. There was a stunned silence. Grace froze, mortified. Victor turned, expecting to crush the interruption with a single, cold glare. Instead, he met a pair of bright, fearless eyes sparkling with innocence, disarming in a way no adult could ever be. For reasons he refused to name, he didn't lash out. Instead, he crouched slightly, lowering his voice. "Do I really look that serious?" Mia giggled, nodding. Like a robot in a fancy suit. The investor laughed awkwardly, charmed by the exchange. To Victor's horror and relief, so did others nearby. Cameras flashed, whispers rippled. Victor Knight smiling at a little girl. He straightened, clearing his throat, but his mask had cracked. For the first time in years, a child had walked straight past his armor. Grace, red in the face, knelt beside Mia. "Sweetheart, don't bother Mr. Knight." But Victor's voice stopped her. Calm, deliberate, almost foreign in tone. "She's not bothering me." Grace blinked, too stunned to reply. And somewhere deep down, a seed was planted. In the days that followed, Victor kept encountering scenes he couldn't ignore. Grace staying late after events not because she had to, but because she couldn't bear leaving things unfinished. Grace smiling at strangers despite exhaustion etched into her eyes. Grace refusing pity, carrying herself with a quiet conviction of someone who had survived storms without an umbrella. More than once, Victor caught Mia's laughter echoing in his head long after leaving the events. The girl's joy was contagious, too pure, too unfiltered to belong to the ruthless world he inhabited. She saw him not as Victor Knight, billionaire, but as a man, one she dared to tease. And that unsettled him more than any hostile takeover or courtroom negotiation could. One late evening, after another gala where Grace had once again endured subtle sneers from guests who noticed her humble shoes, Victor found himself outside. He stood there in the cold air, his tie loosened, clenching and unclenching his fists. Jane joined him quietly. "You saw it too," she said knowingly. Victor didn't turn. Saw what? The way she doesn't let the world crush her. The way the child melts, even your stone heart. Victor scoffed, but it sounded hollow even to his own ears. Don't romanticize it, Mother. She just doesn't know her place. Jane's smile held both sadness and wisdom. And perhaps, Victor, it's you who has forgotten yours. Victor's chest tightened. He wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. Because deep down, he knew. Meanwhile, Grace lay awake that night in her small apartment, Mia asleep beside her. She remembered the look in Victor's eyes at the gala, not the arrogance, not the ridicule, but something fleeting, something almost human. She turned to her daughter, whispering into the dark. I don't know why life keeps throwing us near that man, Mia. But if he stands in our way again, I will not let him take away who we are. Her voice trembled, but her conviction burned bright. Because storms might break umbrellas, but not spirits. And Grace Carter's spirit was the kind that could turn humiliation into quiet dignity. And slowly, far too slowly for Victor's liking, that dignity had begun to unsettle the billionaire more than he could admit. Grace Carter had always lived with the feeling that she was standing on fragile ground. One wrong step, and the world could collapse beneath her feet. But nothing could prepare her for the discovery waiting in the shadowed corners of Night Mansion. It began one evening when Grace stayed behind after a charity event. She was filing guest records and tidying the study that Jane Knight occasionally lent for staff use. The room smelled faintly of cedar and old paper, a place heavy with memories. Mia was nearby, sketching quietly on the rug, humming to herself. Grace smiled at her daughter's innocence, that little cocoon of joy that shielded her from reality. But then Grace's hand brushed against a drawer that wouldn't close properly. She pulled it open. Inside lay a stack of folders sealed in elegant leather. Curiosity whispered. Hesitation screamed. But she needed no more than one accidental glance. A photograph slipped loose, face down. She picked it up and froze. The picture showed a much younger Jane Knight holding a baby. Not Victor. Not any person Grace had ever seen. There was something secretive in the way Jane clutched that child, her eyes both fierce and sorrowful. Beneath the photo lay legal papers, birth certificates, adoption notes, inheritance records. Grace's lips parted as she read the surname scrawled faintly across old papers, Carter. Her hands shook. The truth formed like thunder in her mind. Jane Knight once had another child. A child hidden from society, buried in the shadows for the sake of her spotless reputation. That child had been Mia's father, which meant Jane Knight was Mia's grandmother. Grace almost dropped the papers. Her pulse pounded, tears stung her eyes. How? Why had this been buried in lies? She heard footsteps. With a panic sharper than a blade, she shoved the papers back into the drawer, slammed it shut, and composed herself. Mia looked up innocently, smiling as if nothing had changed. But everything had. Later, Grace found herself staring at her daughter as she slept peacefully, tiny hand curled around her pillow. Her heart ached with the weight of truth. Your grandmother is alive, she whispered, her voice trembling in the darkness. And she's been beside you all this time, pretending. The betrayal, the lie, the pain, all tangled with gratitude, because a part of Grace knew Jane's affection had been genuine. But now she understood why that connection felt so intense, so unexplainable. The next afternoon, Grace confronted Jane. I know, she said bluntly, stepping into Jane's private parlor, chest tight. I found the papers. About your other child. About my husband. Jane froze. For the first time, the flawless poise cracked. Her eyes glistened with a reflexive pain she had hidden for decades. My son, Jane whispered, a tremor in her voice. He was my greatest love and my greatest shame. Grace swallowed hard, anger and sorrow swirling within her. Why didn't you tell me? Why hide me as real family from her? Jane clasped her hands together, pearls trembling against her chest. Because I was a coward. I was young when I had him. The world that raised me, it would never have forgiven me for bringing a child out of wedlock. My father threatened to cut me off, to destroy everything. So I let the world believe he didn't exist. I gave him a life away from me, and I buried the truth. Her voice broke. And when he died, Jane's tears fell freely now. I thought I had lost him forever, until I saw your Mia and his smile in her eyes. Grace's stomach clenched. The layers of truth were suffocating. Jane wasn't just another wealthy woman meddling in her life. She was family. More than that, Victor was family. Her thoughts reeled. Victor, Mia's uncle. The irony was bitter. Fate had tied them tighter than any accident of cars or galas. Victor soon sensed something was amiss. That same evening, he entered the library to find his mother's eyes red, her hands trembling. What happened? He demanded, suspicion sharpening each word. What did she tell you? He cast a piercing glance at Grace. Grace lifted her chin, refusing to shrink this time. Ask your mother yourself, Victor. You deserve to hear the truth. But Jane's voice cut through before Grace could explain further. No, she said softly, a strange resolve in her tone. It's time I speak it aloud. Victor looked impatient, aggressive. Mother. Jane's hand rose. Enough. For years I have lived with silence as my prison. But you deserve to know, even if it shatters everything. The room felt colder. Grace held Mia close, her arms protective. Jane's confession poured out with trembling words. She told Victor about her first child. Her mistake, her fear, her decision to hide him from the cruel gossips of society. She told him of the boy's resilience, his charm, his struggles, his early death that scarred her soul. And then she spoke his name, the father of Mia, Grace's late husband. Victor staggered back as though struck. You mean to tell me? He struggled to breathe. I had a brother? Yes. Jane's tears dripped onto her clasped hands. And you've walked by his daughter without knowing she carried your blood. Silence spread, thick and suffocating. Victor's face hardened, disbelief flaring into rage. He turned to Grace, his voice a whip. Did you know? Did you plan this? Grace's own pain ignited. Plan this? Her voice cracked with fury and heartbreak. Do you think I wanted my daughter to grow up fatherless, only to discover the family she has left despises us? Do you think I chose this, Victor? Mia stirred at the raised tones, clinging to Grace's dress in confusion. In that instant, Jane stepped forward, voice trembling but strong. This is my fault, not hers. If you must hate someone, Victor, let it be me. But Victor's fists tightened at his sides. Rage, betrayal, and confusion burned through him like wildfire. He left the room without another word, doors slamming hard enough to shake the walls. Grace held Mia close, her heart heavier than ever. She looked at Jane, who now seemed years older, diminished by the weight of her confession. We can't run from the truth anymore, Jane whispered, almost to herself. Soon everyone will know. And when they do, we may lose everything. Grace closed her eyes, silent tears streaking her cheeks. She had stepped into the wrong car weeks ago by mistake, but now she realized there were no mistakes left. This was fate, and fate had secrets sharp enough to tear their worlds apart. Gala nights always smelled of money and perfume, but this one also reeked of tension. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and polished marble, yet beneath the golden glow, whispers crawled like shadows. The guest list was a parade of the richest names in the country, gathered to celebrate another Night Foundation charity event. Cameras lined the walls. Every smile was measured. Every move, a headline waiting to happen. Grace Carter stood among the service staff, But tonight she wasn't hidden in a corner. Jane Knight had insisted she remain at the family's side. Introduced quietly to important attendees as a trusted assistant, Grace wore a simple dress borrowed from the wardrobe team, her nerves hidden beneath a straight spine and steady gaze. But she could feel them, eyes tracing the cut of her modest gown, mouths curling into half smiles, questions dangling unsaid. Who is she? Where did she come from? Why is she standing with them? Grace was used to existing on the outside. But tonight, someone was determined to push her back there hard. It happened midway through the evening. The crowd had gathered near the stage for Victor's speech, glasses of champagne raised, journalists recording every word. Grace stood to one side, watching him command a room with that sharp, disciplined voice. He looked like steel wrapped in silk, untouchable. Then, from near the front, a woman's voice rose shrill, cutting through the applause. "Isn't it inspiring," she sneered, "that the Knight family has chosen charity cases not only to serve their drinks but to stand beside them?" Gasps and murmurs spread instantly. The woman, clearly an aristocrat drunk on champagne and cruelty, gestured toward Grace. Her diamond bracelet glittered as sharp as her tongue. "I've heard she scrubs kitchens, that she lives in some shabby little apartment downtown. Tell us, Miss Carter, was it ambition or desperation that brought you into their circle?" Laughter rippled, forced, venomous, eager to feed on humiliation. Cameras turned, flashing like lightning. Grace froze. Her heart hammered so loudly it drowned out the room. Mia wasn't here tonight, thank God, but humiliation pressed into her bones all the same. She wanted to vanish, to escape into shadows. But before she could summon words, a voice stronger than all cut through the hall. Enough. Victor Knight. He had stepped away from the podium, his eyes fixed on the accuser like twin blades. The crowd hushed, astonished. "Do you think money makes you noble?" His voice was calm but heavy, like thunder before the storm. "Do you think mocking someone for their struggles elevates you?" The woman paled, stammering, I didn't mean." Victor's hand rose, silencing her. Then he turned, facing the crowd, his words aimed wider. "Grace Carter," he said, and his tone wasn't the usual icy disdain. It rang with something fierce, something protective, "is more courageous than anyone here tonight. She has known what hunger is, what exhaustion feels like, and yet she stands unbroken. She works harder in one day than most of us do in a lifetime cushioned by wealth. That is dignity. That is strength. And if you can't see that, then you don't understand the meaning of honor." Gasps rippled through the room again, this time softer, tinged with awe. Reporters scribbled furiously. The crowd had expected cold arrogance from Victor Knight. Instead, he had delivered fire. Grace stood frozen, tears stinging her eyes, not from pain this time, but from the shock of unexpected defense. Victor's gaze met hers. For a fleeting second, she saw something real. No disdain, no ridicule, something closer to respect. And just as the silence reached its peak, another voice trembled into it. "Jane Knight, Victor is right," she said, stepping forward, pearls quivering against her chest. "Grace Carter is not just courageous. She is family. And it is time the world knows why." The atmosphere cracked like glass. Whispers surged instantly. "Family?" Victor turned, shocked. "Mother, don't." But Jane raised her hand, voice steady though her eyes welled. "I have lived a life of secrets," she confessed, looking out over a sea of wealth and judgment. "And in doing so, I betrayed my own heart. Many years ago, I bore a son outside of marriage. Fear of scandal drove me to abandon him to another life. He grew into a kind and brilliant man. He was Grace Carter's husband and Mia's father." The room erupted. Gasps again. finger pointing, journalists surging forward. Jane pressed on, her voice breaking. Yes, Grace is my daughter-in-law, and Mia is my granddaughter. My silence has been my greatest sin, but no longer. Tonight, before all of you, I claim them. I will not hide them again. Victor staggered as though the ground had been pulled out beneath him. Brother. He'd had a brother. And he'd never known. The revelation hit him harder than he was willing to show. For a flicker, his mask cracked. Raw grief, confusion, rage. But he said nothing. He couldn't. Grace's hands trembled, but she didn't step back. She stood straighter. For years, humiliation had chased her like a shadow. But tonight, dignity burned brighter. She spoke at last, her voice clear and unwavering. All my life, people have told me I was less, that I didn't belong. But dignity, she said, eyes sweeping over the crowd, is not built from titles. It is built from courage, from love. She glanced briefly at Jane, then at Victor. And I will never be ashamed of mine. A hush fell over the hall. Some looked away in shame. Others clapped, tentatively at first, then stronger. Soon, applause thundered through the ballroom, echoing against marble and gold. For the first time since entering this world of power and cruelty, Grace wasn't running. She wasn't hiding. She was standing tall. Humiliation had turned to redemption. And the story wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to every onlooker who had ever felt small in the face of wealth. Later that night, the flashes of cameras faded. The guests departed with whispered gossip, and silence returned to the mansion. Grace found herself outside, staring at the stars. Victor approached slowly, hands in his pockets, face unreadable. For a moment, they stood in silence. Then softly, almost reluctantly, he spoke. I was wrong about you. Grace turned her head, incredulous. What changed? Victor's eyes darkened, conflicted. I saw the courage I've lacked for years. Her heart ached with the weight of it, but she said nothing more. Behind them, Jane watched from the balcony, tears drying on her cheeks. The truth had cost her everything she once valued, her pristine reputation, her perfect mask. But perhaps it had given her something far greater. A second chance at family. The storm had passed. Not the rain outside, but the storm that had shaken the foundations of the Knight family and forever altered the course of Grace Carter's life. The night of truth had left the city buzzing. Headlines exploded, gossip swirled, business channels replayed Victor Knight's defense of a so-called nobody for days. For the first time in years, Victor wasn't portrayed as the cold, untouchable billionaire. He was the man who had stood up, and that single act set everything in motion. But for Grace, what lingered most wasn't the applause or the gossip. It was the silence after. The strange sense of peace that comes when a weight you never wanted to carry has finally been lifted. The truth was out. There were no more secrets. And dignity, once stolen, had returned to her hands. The morning after, Grace sat with Mia in the quiet corner of the Knight Mansion's garden. The child picked daisies, humming softly. Mommy, she said thoughtfully, does this mean I have a grandma now? Grace stroked her daughter's hair. Yes, it means that. She should have told us sooner, but she loves you, sweetheart. I believe she always has. Mia smiled, a pure, innocent smile that had the power to heal the wounds of generations. Inside the mansion, Victor strode into his mother's study. Jane stood by the window, sipping tea, her gaze distant. You've shaken an empire, he remarked dryly. Jane's lips curved wryly. Empires crumble when built on lies. Families only survive in truth. Victor hesitated, eyes shadowed with emotion he rarely allowed. All these years, I thought I was alone in carrying Father's legacy of shame. And now, to know I had a brother, and that he's gone. His throat tightened. I don't know what to feel. Jane reached for his hand, a gesture simple yet heavy with meaning. Feel what you must, but don't let pain turn you colder, Victor. It's time you let the past shape you, not cage you. That evening, Victor found Grace preparing to leave with Mia. She hadn't expected him to appear, but there he was, standing by the door, quieter than she'd ever seen him. "I owe you an apology," he said simply. Grace raised her eyebrows, skeptical. "For which time?" "There are plenty to choose from." Victor almost smiled, though it faltered quickly. "For all of them. For judging you. For humiliating you. For refusing to see you as more than a reminder of what I hated about myself." He lifted his gaze to hers. "You taught me something I thought I'd buried. That strength isn't built by walls, but by standing in the storm and refusing to bow." Grace's chest tightened. His words, though imperfect, carried sincerity. He wasn't begging for forgiveness. He was offering truth. And sometimes truth was enough. With a soft exhale, she nodded. "Then let's call it a truce." Their eyes locked, something fragile and new stirring between them. Not grand passion yet, but a thread of respect that could become something greater with time. Weeks later, the first invitation arrived. Not a job announcement this time, not a temporary contract. An invitation. Gold lettering, sent directly from the Knight estate, addressed to Grace Carter and Mia Carter. The car that picked them up was familiar, sleek, black, elegant. But this time, Grace didn't stumble in by mistake, drenched and humiliated. This time, the driver opened the door as a gesture of honor, not duty. Grace held Mia's hand tightly. Together, they stepped inside. Inside the car, Victor sat waiting. No arrogance, no disdain. Just a man, gaze steady, as if silently telling her you belong here now. Jane sat beside him, her smile tender, pearls glinting in the fading sunlight. Mia bounced excitedly, her laughter filling the vehicle. Grace leaned back, heart swelling as she whispered to herself, words she had longed to believe. "We're not guests anymore. We're family." For the first time in years, hope didn't feel distant. It felt real, tangible, within reach. Dignity, courage, love, these were the true riches she carried. And tonight they were finally recognized. There are moments when life folds on itself, when pain transforms into promise. For Grace, the wrong car had led her to the right destiny. For Victor, walls of ice had cracked, revealing the spark of humanity still alive within him. And for Jane, redemption had finally replaced regret. It wasn't a fairy tale, not yet, but it was a beginning. A new beginning. Follow the channel to stay with us and be part of every new chapter filled with courage, love, and transformation.